Welcome, guys. Let's talk more about Taoism and Qigong. So, from episode 47, got a question from Max 3 days ago. Okay. It says the part about post training for healing purposes, healing others is really interesting. I am an acupressure twin na guy myself. It would be interesting how to use the training to enhance that area. Okay, so for new viewers, post training is just a nickname for standing qigong where you don't move. It's a static practice. It's a core practice of non-doing. So you're not visualizing, you're not controlling, anything like that. You simply stand and you're absorbing energy for the lower center. It's really for physical energy boost. There's a lot of methods to it, and I talked about it in previous episodes. So if you're interested, you can watch previous episodes. And then he's asking, I'm acupressure twin na guy. Twin na or toi na in Chinese is hands-on healing, basically. It's very related to acupressure. You learn different meridians and how the organs work according to Chinese medicine, and you treat different illness with it. So that's just some background. He's asking how post training can help twin na practitioners. That's a very good question. When I was really sick 5 years ago, I am not a twin na guy or a Chinese medicine doctor, so I can just give you my background experience. Hopefully, it'll help you, Max. So I was really sick 5 years ago. I was a full-time martial artist since 1980. No, I started martial art in 1986, and I became full-time out of that 30 something years. For 24 years, I was training full-time. And then I got really, 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 really sick, right? It started physical. I had brain fog and dizziness, feel needles around my head, no energy, getting sick all the time. I couldn't walk even across my house. I was throwing up all the time. I was getting sick all the time, and I wouldn't recover, right? I had trouble sleeping. I had sleeping paralysis. And then later on, it got worse. It became emotional. I started getting anxious, about 2 panic attacks a day, depression for the first time in my life. Didn't understand why. Saw a lot of doctors, Western doctors, neurologists, PTSD therapy, post-concussion therapists, occupational work hazard therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, regular MD, sport medicine doctor. And then on the eastern side, I did see acupressure and twin na expert like yourself. I saw a lot of acupuncturists. I saw a lot of herbologists. I even saw a few qigong doctors. All of them would diagnose me with different things. Like the PTSD therapist would say I have PTSD. The neurologist say I have messed up chemicals in my brain. The post-concussion therapist would say I have a concussion. The Chinese medicine doctor would say I have low qi. So everybody will diagnose me based on their discipline, which is fine. But the problem is nothing worked. Nothing fixed me. I wasn't healed. I wasn't getting any better. Yeah, and I was like that for 2 years straight. It was the hardest 2 years of my life because I didn't get a break. It was like that every single day. Eventually, what happened as a last resort is I went to see my Sifu, and he's a professor of Chinese medicine. He specialized in acupressure and twin na, just like you. He's a Qigong doctor. He was a head professor in Beijing, and he also knows about herbology, but I don't know how much he treats patients with herbology. And he's also a Qigong grandmaster. When I went to my Sifu and I told him what's going on, because he was retired, so I didn't want to bother him unless I really need to. I said, Sifu, I'm really sick. This is what's happening to me. Western and Eastern medicine, nothing's working. I am really, really screwed. What am I going to do, right? And he says, I was expecting that he's going to say he's going to give me a treatment in acupressure or give me a treatment in acupuncture or maybe a treatment in herbology or even qigong twin na. He surprised me when he said, look, none of that's going to work. You have to start practicing qigong. And I told him I've been doing qigong for 30 years. He said, no, you've been doing kung fu for 30 years, 40 hours plus a week. But qigong, you dabble. You just do a little bit here, a little bit there. I'm saying actually practice qigong classically, seriously. And classically, the rule in qigong is minimum 2 hours, maximum 4 hours a day to start. He wanted me to train full time in qigong, right? So that's what I did. And then after 2 years, I was healed completely. And now I'm on my almost my 5th year. No, almost my 6th year, 5.5 years. And now I just do it because I enjoy it. So that's my story. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because you asked how Qigong can help twin knot and acupressure. When I went to a lot of acupuncturists and a lot of acupressure people, they weren't Qigong practitioners. They strictly just memorized the theory of Chinese medicine and figure out where to put the needles or their fingers in certain points in the body. And none of that kind of treatment worked on me for that 2 years I was sick. But when my Sifu did Qigong Twin Na, because the to backtrack even more, when I was 25, way before I got sick, I wasn't really sick till I was 45. But when I was 25, that's how I met Sifu because I got in a car accident. My back was screwed. And he's the one that treated me and fixed my back. That's how I became a student. After he fixed me, I was really shocked and I wanted to become a student. And the reason why I was really shocked is he's an acupressure twin knot specialist. But when he touched my back, he didn't use any needles. And I was expecting in acupuncture, you're supposed to use needles. He didn't use any needles. Instead, he used his fingers. And I went to a lot of hands-on healer before where my back was screwed up. And they would press into me to massage me or push different pressure points. What shocked me when I first met Professor Zheng was not only did he use his fingers instead of needles, he barely touched me. I can feel the touch, but he wasn't going into me like most massage therapists or acupressure or twin knot specialists, rubbing and slapping and pressing hard on my body. None of that was happening. Sometimes he'll hover his palm above me a couple inches. Sometimes he'll touch me gently. At that point, I was 20. Man, that was many years ago. I feel old now. I was probably 23, 22, 20, 24 actually. And I never believed in Qi. I think it's hokey. I think it's stupid. I'm an atheist. So when he barely touched me, I was like, come on, man. You got to use some needles or push hard into me, fix me. That's what I was thinking, right? Because I was very ignorant. But Western medicine and Eastern medicine couldn't fix me, just like later on when I was 45. And Sifu barely touched me, and I could walk again. And I was sold because I was so skeptical. So I know it wasn't a placebo effect, but yet I could walk again. And the doctor said I'll never do martial arts again when I went to different doctors. But I end up having full functional back and legs. So that shocked me to the point where I realized my worldview was wrong. That it's bullshit. It's crap. I'm a fighter. I'm a martial artist. Don't bullshit me. That kind of thinking, right? After he fixed me, I couldn't argue with it. The results speak for itself. I was walking again. So the first thing I did was I begged him to accept me as a student because I couldn't believe what he did. So he did accept me as a student. That's one of the greatest moments of my life. And I can't believe he accepted me because he wasn't teaching. He stopped teaching since he moved to Canada and became a doctor. And one of the first questions I asked Sifu I was like, how come you don't use needles? And he says, needles are really for people that have no power, no chi. I use my hands. My second question is, okay, you use your hands, but I went to a lot of hands-on healer before in different traditions, and they usually push pretty hard or tap. How come you barely touch me? He said, well, because I'm using my chi. And that I almost fell off my chair when he said that because, again, I came from a background where please don't say the word chi to me. That's so hokey and so woo-woo, right? But in the same time, because he walked his talk and allowed me to walk again and fix my back, I couldn't argue with him. But that made an impression on my mind. And then later on, he told me that even though we learned medical qigong, some Tibet practices, his main practice was standing, post training. And I've met a lot of people that post train in my life, but nobody with his degree of power. And then later on, I find out he actually worked with the Ichuan founder in the same hospital in the cancer department. And I knew that in China, in order to work with the founder, number one, and number two, in order to work at, the cancer department of the hospital, you're not like normal. You're pretty elite in your ability. That's when I realized I stumbled upon a great teacher. I thought I'm not just an average guy. And then later on, I find out that not only did he learn each one and he practiced with the founder, but but I found out later on, he said most of his power for healing came from standing. And as it goes on, I'm finding out more stuff because in the Chinese culture, you can't just go and ask a bunch of questions. That's considered really disrespectful. That's why I'm only finding out bits and pieces as I put it together. That's why I keep saying later on, right? Because you got to earn your questions. If you want to ask a question, you have to first practice. And then you earn the right to ask a question, then they give you the answer, and then you practice that. Once you have that, then you earn the right for the next knowledge, right? So you got to work for stuff. There's no sense of self-entitlement at all. That was allowed. So that's the main thing, man. When you ask, like, how does post training help your twin now? I think really is power. Because when he touched me, it went right into my body and it was starting to do stuff. Whereas when I went to different acupressure people, a lot of them, and a lot of acupuncturists, it seems to me they're treating my body as a machine and they're trying to fix the machine, unscrew this, push that, rub that, slap this, put a needle here, put a needle there, because in theory the chi flows like this, in theory the chi flow like that. But I know they didn't practice qigong, so it was all theory, and they treated my body like a piece of meat on a board, pushing it, cutting it, slapping it. That was very different than the way Sifu did. Because Sifu was like, look, different points in the body in acupressure and acupuncture is actually a misunderstanding. The points shift. You have to use your chi to feel. It's not that precise. Because if it was, all we got to do is get an acupuncture chart of pressure point and memorize it, then we all be doctors, right? The human body doesn't work like this. And that's as far as he told me, because I wasn't in his medical class. I was only in the Qigong class because I was only interested in using Qigong at that point when I was 24 for better martial arts. So that's the first thing. Second thing is I noticed, because I have friends who are acupressure and also Chinese medicine doctors, and sometimes we have tea and talk about Qigong, I noticed they approach a patient based on the 5 element organs a lot of time. Like if you got metal, gum in Chinese, that would be your lungs. And each organ has a very specific meridian chi flow, like here for the lungs. And it also go with a corresponding organ. So for the metal, it would be in Chinese medicine based on grief. And the antidote of that is the ability to let go. And the key to letting go is the ability to simplify your life. So there is a chain of event, right? And that would be wood, the second element. Wood is your liver, your organ, also responsible for anger. And the antidote of that is personal growth, because it's the type of anger that happens when you're being held down, when you're stuck, when you feel something's holding you back and you're not growing the way you want to, like a plant growing. So the antidote of that is personal growth. And then water. Water is the kidneys. Kidneys responsible for fear. And the antidote of that is wisdom. So that gives you a gist. I'll maybe talk about the other elements in more of a detail in another episode. So what I found is when people are sick, when you go to an average acupuncturist, like I went to at least 8 of them in Richmond, what they usually do is take your pulse, find out which organ is weak, diagnose you as having an organ problem, chi flow problem, and a very specific emotional problem. So let's say if they go, oh, you got your liver, your wood flow is not good. Okay, I'm going to put a bunch of needles here, here, and here in acupuncture to try to stimulate the flow. In my case, it didn't work because I was so sick. But in a lot of people's cases, it does work and they do feel a little bit better. But the problem with this is you're only giving the guy a Band-Aid. Let's say the guy has a lung problem, because recently it's the fall. In Chinese medicine, fall is lungs, which is the metal element. And you go, oh, the guy has a lung problem. I'm going to put some needles here and here so the chi flow in the metal in the lungs will flow good. And the guy will be able to release some grief. He feels a little bit happier. But that doesn't solve anything, because a lot of it, probably 80% of it, comes from your lifestyle, mainly in Chinese, your destiny in China. So if you just go and simulate energy flow and make someone feel better about their grief or their lungs because you better the chi flow, so what? It's just a Band-Aid. If he doesn't change his lifestyle that's producing grief, then maybe 6 months from now, the problem's going to come back. And to me, that's the problem with modern acupuncture and modern acupressure. Because like Sifu always said, Professor Zheng always said, he said, all this Chinese medicine stuff came from mystics and Taoism. That's where it originated. And when the communists took over, 80% of it was burned to the ground. Nothing spiritual was allowed to be taught. They only taught the lowest center, the qi part, the power part. So now the medicine's incomplete. To use an example, you're not solving people's lifestyle, the spiritual problem they have that produced the karma which causes illness. In the case of grief, they don't have the ability to let go grief. So if you don't solve that problem and just put a bunch of needles or herbs or what have you to make someone stimulate the flow in their metal element, their lungs, the problem's just going to come back because they didn't change their karma or lifestyle. So that's why original Taoism, the healing methods, pre-communist era, treated the entire body holistically. They don't just treat your physical qi flow problem in the case of the lungs. They would actually correct the best of their ability your lifestyle problem, the spiritual part. In the case of grief, you have a problem that you cannot simplify and let go. So how do you get someone to do that? Besides verbally counseling, is adopting a Taoist philosophy. That's just the surface. And then the important part is actually to change them spiritually by offering some sitting practices, whether it's through prayer, breath work, or meditation, or best yet, direct merging process in the sitting practices, the qigong. So please leave more questions below so we can discuss this more in detail, because I'm just offering really generalized blanket statements right now to open up the conversation. Because if I go any farther, it's just going to get too confusing, right? So I want to know which direction we can take this. But to me, this is a very interesting question because I noticed that a lot of people say Chinese medicine doesn't work. I'm like, yeah, that's because 80% of it was burned to the ground, right? So if you go back to its root before before 1949, before the Communist Party took over, it was a very shamanistic medicine, a mystic medicine. That's what Chinese medicine was before they ripped out all the spiritual stuff and only gave you the physical needles and herb part, which really corrects the body's functioning and energy flow, but it doesn't correct the spiritual problem that caused the lifestyle, which caused the problem. And even Western medicine a lot of time recognize that most of your, what do they say? 80% of chronic illness came from stress, and most stress comes from an incorrect lifestyle that's repeating in a loop. So Chinese medicine agree with that originally, but now all they do is kind of treat the physical problem, right? I hope I answered your questions, and I hope I didn't offend you in any way. I'm not saying acupressure or tuna is not good. I think it's great, but I think these practitioners should, one, start doing qigong, and two, research the history and root of Chinese medicine if they're going to practice it. All right, so before I go, I want to say, please leave your questions below so we can discuss more things about Taoism and Qigong. Secondly, I want to say, in tonight's class, actually, Thursday, in our Qigong program, follow the links below in the description. Go to the website. We're going to be working on lotus position sitting, working on the higher centers. In last week's class, we worked on the lower center to settle your mind and stop you from chattering and reducing some anxiety. On tonight's class, we're going to be working on these two centers, the merging process, which gives people a lot of relief in their emotional gapping and all the tension in the heart, right? So if you're interested in that, please come and join us in the community. See you next time.